stations with your screens.
They're all it's always a backspace on the that was one thing. There was so much stuff you could do. But did you read when you were going through stuff that there's Windows Web Forms and there's Windows Forms, and we're finding keywords that like key down or like press key is like not something for the forms we're using. It was weird. It was messing me up.
Oh no, because like
Backspace works until there's no
and so
value
what
there.
you just have to do is rub everything in there. So what you just do is type log out there, not press out one. It's greater than 0. Then you run your log. Then you start making an int guess. You can bring that text box guess text into a 13. And then you can pass that guess down to here. And I can start doing that. It doesn't start with the text box anything. Because if you convert to 32, it needs to have something in there. Right. Have something in there. Crashes. I'm really bad at explaining this. My really common.
I see what you're doing. Yeah.
And so this part, this is what literally, this was a whole. This is what we want to get. Was this that piece of code right there, that one. And once I got it, I can control everything I wanted because I made a last guess and just one. But every time that the text box gets updated, then the last guess gets replaced. So if you just press backspace, you're just going to keep getting a number. So that's why I would consider it. That wasn't a challenge.
They wanted to live on.
That wasn't a challenge. So I don't really know if I did it right. I mean, I spent. Then I actually figured out that problem. I'm happy with where I'm at.
Right.
I learned a lot. This keyword is super common.
That is the point.
This keyword is just insanely powerful.
Yeah, okay, let's get started. I think I've got attendance, but everything ready. I'm sharing my screen like I'm supposed to. We're getting all done here. One of our last days. How's your hot and cold game? You want to show us? Anybody? I think that we have some people that have some awesome solutions here that I bet others would like to see. I heard a little bit of chatter up here in front. They were talking about all those events for text boxes. That's what this one was. It was just to torture you to figure out which events do you want to use, which ones work for you. Now, different people are going to have things work different ways. So this is a fun one for me to test. Did anybody's come out where sometimes people have it where, like, when you type the first letter, like number 1, it'll say too low and cold, and then when you type the 2 because you wanted to actually make it a number 12, it responds to that, and then when you type the third digit. So what can you do for that problem? Because that's not the way the game should work, right? That doesn't make any sense, does it? If it's just going crazy, changing the colors all the time, every time somebody types a digit. I had someone in here yesterday working on it from the other class that was having that problem, and it was hard for them to visualize the fact that because they put their code in the key press event or the key down event, I don't remember which one it was, that code was going to execute every time someone pressed a key. The only way that person can get this to work properly is to say, if the key they pressed was the enter key, now go ahead and evaluate whether I should say higher or lower or that, that kind of thing. Because I want them to type the whole number and then press enter, and then I can decide if it's higher or lower. If I'm deciding at every digit that they type or every digit they backspace, then I might be overdoing a little bit. That's a really common way to get this one turned in. Just want you to kind of use that knowledge, add it to your tool belt. Remember that when we're talking about a key press event, that's going to execute every time they press a key. And you might not want to do something every time they press a key. We for sure want to make sure that when they press a key, they're putting in a number. but we don't necessarily want to do all of our process to compare it to our secret number and all those kinds of things. So who has one that works that way where it kind of flashes around every time you enter a number? I want to see one. Show us, show us, show us. Go, Josh, show us. Josh and Bat, you're okay. But I did not say I would. Oh, that looks great.
So here's mine, and it changes every time you put in a key. So I have like a guest count at the top, and you can see like whenever you put in keys, it goes down by one. And just because I don't want it to take up a whole lot of time, I have a little menu here. So the number is 796, and you can see when you get it correct, it changes to yellow. If you go too high, if your highest number is bigger than like the maximum, which is 1,000 in this case, it'll set it to 1,000 and highlight the number. So you can never guess higher than the highest number. You can see if you guess above it, it'll turn red. If you guess under, it'll turn blue. And for the minimum, it can't be set higher than the maximum, or else it'll just make it one less than the maximum. And the max can be 0, obviously. So it'll set it to 2 with a minimum of 1. And you can guess your guesses. And so I was having one problem when I first did this, is that like I couldn't get a random number to be generated correctly, or like I was having it in the key precedent. So every time I put in a key, it would change it to it would change like the random number.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, and I couldn't figure out how to do it, and so my solution was just to store all the new numbers in an array, and then your guess would be compared to the first number in that array. And so that way, no matter like how many times you change the keys or whatever, it'll always compare it to n in the array. And n basically means like whenever you push a new game, n goes up by 1. So then instead of comparing the first value in the array, it'll compare the second, which is also a random number. So that's how I did like holding the random number value. But
Awesome. Can you show us your code again and zoom in a little bit?
the code,
Yeah. There we go.
So this is inside the key press thing, and I could easily put all of this code inside of like if key press equals like key down or whatever.
Uh-huh.
But I just didn't cross my mind.
Well, and I think that that's the point of this assignment, is to make you realize, oh my goodness, there's all these different events. And go up to the top of your event, if you would, for us, Josh, where it starts. Whenever we've got that event args that's being passed to us, if you notice, depending on what event you're using, you're going to have different things, different parameters passed into that event. So when you're looking at this text changed event, you don't necessarily have those key code fields available to you, right? And you almost have to do like a key press event to have those different key codes available. So there's lots of different ways to handle it. And part of this one is just for you to explore those and kind of be thinking about how it can really snowball how things react. Uh-huh.
Would that make it operate the same if you got rid of the event args and then did the key press like, because I did see a lot of examples where it was getting rid of event args and using a different keyword.
Using a different
Could you do a
parameter.
comma?
I've not tried that, but you could sure try it and see.
It didn't work.
It didn't work.
When I used both of them, yeah, it didn't work.
What we ended up doing last night, and when the person that was here for a while, is that in our key press event, we made sure that they pressed a number, and that's all that person put in that key press event. Like, you know, if the key down was whatever the if statement was, you know, not a control code and not a character or whatever, then we set that switch to true to say that it was properly handled. And then in the text changed event, we were able to check to see if they'd pressed the enter key and if they had actually do all of the code for the testing of everything. But it took a lot of moving things around and going, well, why can't you try it there? You know, why won't it work there? And that kind of stuff. So it is
I thought in the instructions when you said like do not use a submit button and use like an untext change, I thought you didn't like want us to press like enter or like.
It's so confusing looking at those instructions. It's totally understandable. So whenever, if your game works like this, that's not a problem. When I grade, it's just a problem to you because it's not exactly the way you want it. But yes, you almost have to check for them pressing enter.
Yeah.
We can't have a button because if we have a button, then that just takes us to where we don't have to try any of those text changed or key press events at all. And I wanted you guys to explore those because as you see, they can be quite frustrating. So yeah, you're welcome. If you want to change that a little bit or update it in TFS, I'm definitely not going to be looking at it or grading it today. It's not on my plan. So you are welcome to update it if you want to. And that's totally up to you. Because like in the way this one works, I'll let you guys think about it. As an instructor, you guys know that there are certain things I'll count off for, like no comments or not using a method when our subject for the chapter was methods, you know, those kinds of things. But this shows a huge amount of effort and a huge amount of success. So when I'm grading, I look at things that way, and I'm not like, oh, this doesn't meet exactly our specifications, because the whole idea to me is that you got an opportunity to explore and see what kind of things you could do with those events. So that's okay, because I would definitely give Josh all the points here because I can tell that he put a huge amount of effort into it, and he learned a whole bunch as he was going through looking at all of these different events. And that's our goal, is to learn. So we're not in it to make the perfect game that we can sell. I'll let you guys wait until you're employed for those ones, and then you can have to have it perfect. You want to show us yours, Josh? Did you? Not really?
Well, I have mine working, but mine just has the same problem to where like.
To where it does that same thing. And so
And I
that's
wanted to add
really,
a button, but
yeah.
I just thought you just meant in general you don't want an enter or a button or press. I just thought you meant like on the text change.
Mhm.
That's what my whole thing
I can
was.
understand that.
So that's,
And
mine works, but it says that.
yeah, and if you want to, like I say, if you want to update it, you sure can, because you could just add that in to see if they pressed enter. Because it was a really small change for that person yesterday. It just took us a little while to find the right spot. Whoops, that's not what I want. So just remember, it's not frustrating, it's learning. That's how it is. Can't make it all perfect. All right, so I hope you learned a lot in working with those. The text changed events, those kind of events, as you can tell, are very, very particular. And honestly, when I was a developer, it was not something that was used very often. But you guys now have a little bit of background, and you know, if you want to do something like that, you can. Let's go back to our GUI menu. Where we left off the other day on our project, I've loaded to Teams. So in our code channel under, well, here it is in the posts, but under files, it's L14 menu with the file read. So there's a couple versions of our L14 menu out there now. So the file read one is our newest one. Don't download if you've already got it, if yours is working, but if you need to get that one from yesterday, do so. Now it's already a zip file. So again, hopefully OneDrive will download it a little bit quicker. We'll need to extract it before we can open it in Visual Studio. Let me get mine open. I'm going to go to TFS and open from there. Bless you, because I know that I updated it last time. What, some people here showed up. right. Okay, I gotta go. I'm looking at somebody else's, so I need to get back to my TFS repo. So it'll take me a second, and it hates me. You guys just blew right through that, creating that class library. Does anybody have any questions about that while I'm letting this connect? You seem to have a good understanding as you did it.
What happened to our class videos? Are they on Teams?
They're on Teams.
How would I find them again? Because it seems like they're in a different spot, or I was just like.
Well, Teams kept moving them. So the best place is in our meetings channel. I'm so glad you asked. Now, there's still a link on Canvas at the beginning of our modules section that goes to this same location. But if you look at meetings, there are files, and all of our recordings are going there. I'm not renaming them or anything, so when I look at them, I'm pretty much having to sort them, you know, like,
By the date.
yeah. And it doesn't stick, so every time you look at one, you have to go back in there and sort them again.
I was totally looking for these yesterday. I couldn't find them, and now I see it's under hidden under the meetings.
Yes.
So, but this is good. This is very
Yeah,
good.
and then, like I said, it's in Canvas on your modules section at the very top.
'Cause I
There's
did
a link
not-
to this place because they kept moving around, so I put a link in Canvas. Do it.
Did you say the starter code is in Teams?
Uh-huh.
Under the codes
Uh-huh.
files? Is it menu read file? Or file read?
Yes. Uh-huh.
Okay.
Yep, that's the one. Okay, so anyhow, we did that class library last time. You guys just jumped right on that.
Yep, I was getting that with that. I wanted a refresher on that. I got
Good,
lost in
because
my
I
life.
thought that we went pretty quick, and you guys just all just followed right along, like, okay, we've got it.
This was something I was looking forward to too, so. when I
It's kind of a
didn't
big
get it-
subject, and it's definitely something that'll be revisited in C# too.
Oh, good.
But just to give you a quick idea that, oh, this is possible. This is why we're creating those class files all the time, because we can compile them into DLLs and reference them in our code all over wherever we want to. So yeah, an advanced topic. Kind of sneaked it in there on you because we were using our class in so many different places. All right, I'm going to try to get to the right one. I've got a couple of our L14 menu apps, so let me make sure I got the right one here. So that's all we did with that class library is we took our class and we made it into a compiled thing so that instead of us having to copy that source code into every project, we could just reference that compiled DLL. Definitely an advanced thing. I'm going to look at my form and make sure that I'm looking at everything right, because like I said, I've got a few versions of this project now. Nope, that's not the right one. All right. I'm going to close this and open it a different way. So it happens to us all. We get stuff in a place we think it is and it's not there. It's definitely happened to me on this one. That looks better. At least I have a list box and things. So let's look at our form. As we were going yesterday, or last time, we did definitely move quickly. Remember, that's why there are all those videos out there so that you can refresh and review. Whenever we were working on our form, the only major change we made was that we added a list box here onto our form. The rest of the things that we did were external to our form, right? We created the reference to our OTC audio app. We saw how the object browser would let us look and see what was going on with that. Did something weird there. It didn't really come all the way up. But if I wanted to, I could look at that object browser. We said we had to make that class file public. We had to put that keyword public in front of our class name, or we wouldn't get any information from our class file when we compiled it. So good, that was a good progress. Now I want to look at our code. And in our code here, we started out commenting, which is great. Let's add a few more. Remember, we're doing the XML comments where we do the 3 slashes, and it's putting the tags in there for us so that if we were looking at these comments through some certain utilities, we would be able to get more information. But as I go through, we've got our class level variables. And last time, we decided that we should keep track of the file name that they opened. We said our public form1 is our default constructor. And in our default constructor, we added the code to initialize an array of our compilations. And we just put 10 objects in there. That could be a limiting factor for us. That's all right. Okay, now I want to start documenting some of these other methods. So right here for our tool strip menu exit, let's click right above it. And let's do our 3 slashes and something like this event procedure will execute from the menu file exit and from the toolbar. Oh, we didn't actually put a toolbar item for file exit, did we? I'm lying. I get rid of that part. So the only way that one will execute is from our menu. Now our help about is the same, right? It's only from our menu. We didn't add a toolbar item for that. So this event procedure will execute from the menu help out. Now in our tool strip about, we do have that message box still that we were using for debugging. And we were just, remember, trying to see the difference between showing a form and using the show dialog method to show a form. And we saw that if we show something as a dialog box, everything around it will stop executing and wait until that dialog box gets completed, like somebody clicks OK or cancel. If we just show it as a regular form, execution of the form behind it, all of the other applications we have going will continue on without being impacted. Okay, so our next one is this font thing. This event procedure will execute from the menu edit font and from the toolbar. So remember, we associated our code with both events so that no matter which one had happened, we would run this code. And then in our font, we just update that font. Next, for our open, this event procedure will execute from the menu file open and from the toolbar. We tried to keep this one simple. Remember, because we were seeing that we have a lot going on here. So this open tool strip menu item method really just works with the Windows open file dialog, right? We set up the defaults. I'll put a comment in there like that. Set up defaults for the file open dialog. And then we show that file open dialog. And if our user doesn't press cancel, then we had, again, a debugging statement to show the file name, which I'll comment out. We don't need that anymore. And then we call our method to process our file. So in our open tool strip menu item method, its purpose in life is to show the Windows file dialog and get a file name. Once it's got a file name, it says, my job is done. I'm going to pass that off to the file process method. So let's look at our file process method. We need to put some comments here. Now, this method is not an event procedure, is it? It doesn't execute based on an event firing. It executes because it was called, just like all the methods we've looked at before. So this method will open and process the selected file. Now, in our file process, again, we're reading in our file name is a parameter, and we are opening that file within a try to make sure that it's a valid file. We don't have any problems, no network issues. And then if we're able to open it, we're going to read each line of the file into our line variable. Now, when we've got a line in our file, we've read a line, we decided that we needed to create a method to process each individual record or each individual line. So we created this process line method, and we pass it this record. The results from our process line method are returned to us, and we place them into our list, our array that we've been building. And then we increase our counter so that the next time through, the next record we read, we'll be ready to add it to the next slot in our array. Our catch processing simply catches any errors and writes information out to the console. Once we're all done with processing our file, we're going to update the data source of that list on our form. Update the data source on. And we saw last time when we did that, if we set our data source in our form load or earlier, it didn't update when we put new items into that list. So this is an area that we need to do some work on. We could have a problem here if it doesn't update automatically. So that could be something that we need to work on. Now, our last method then is our process line method. So let's put a comment here. This method will process each line or record from the file. So when we've got a record from our file, we're going to use the split command to split up all of the fields. We said, hey, split that on commas. Every time you find a comma, pop that into a new entry in that fields array. So then our fields array ends up being our various data items we need for our compilation class. So we create an instance of our compilation class, and we add all of our different fields to it. And then we return that compilation instance to our caller for it to be placed into the array. Whoa, we did a lot. So definitely a lot for you to digest and think about. You guys are just doing fantastic looking at all of these new concepts. You're at that point now. We've handled all of the syntax things like how to do if statements and how to do while loops and stuff. And now we're into the really thinking and making something happen, doing some work. So we can know how to process our file. Let's run this and make sure everything's working before we add any more code. I'm going to choose my file open, find my text file, and just make sure that my album information gets pasted in here properly. Does everybody look good? Got any problems anywhere that we need to resolve before we move on? Because we'll just go quickly. All right, so let's think about this now. We know how to read an item. What happens if we open that file again? I'm not exactly sure. It's something we need to test. So let's see, I'm gonna open it again. Make sure it doesn't crash or cause any trouble. Mine just is starting over with a brand new instance of the file each time. So I'm okay with that. Looks like it's working. But again, we're going to come back to that at the end and check to see if we need to do something to make this list update. Maybe it is putting those items in my array. I better check again. Let's see. I guess the way I could check again, I'm going to put a breakpoint right here. I'm going to put a breakpoint right there where I update my data source. And I'm going to make sure they're staying the same. Okay, there's my reading my first data source. My counter's at 3. If I look at no other really variables available, what I want is my comp list. So I'm going to go down to the M's here. I can't find it. Maybe if I mouse over it, it shows me. There it is. That's better. So I just moused over the my comp list and I've got the little exposure triangle I clicked on and it shows me I have 3 entries in my array. So perfect. Those 3 records from my file. Now if I continue and open my file again, what I want to do here is just make sure that my list still just has those 3. It does, so we're matching okay. I didn't know if it was going to keep adding new entries to our list so that we could keep opening that file over and over and add them to our list. Let's stop our application and let's make it where that's possible because I am worried about this update thing. So in our file process, we set up our counter as a local variable. Instead of making that a local variable, what if we made that a class level variable so that it ended at 3 and then when we did file open again, it added 1 and so it started at 4 and just kept adding more. Let's try it. You'll see what I mean. Let's take this variable and cut it and then go up to the top of our code and find our class level variables and paste that counter. So it's going to have an initial value of 0. That should work. Now, just moving that one line of code, let's see if that impacts us. I've still got my breakpoint. I'm going to check my array. I just have 3 entries like I would expect. So I'm going to continue. And I should see my 3 entries. Now I'm going to open my file again. This is where I should be able to tell a difference from moving that line of code. Pick another, same file. Now I'm going to look at my list. Now my list has 6 entries because they're doubled up, right? Because I didn't reset that counter when I started processing the file. So I'm going to continue and see if our list box gets updated properly. It didn't. So here's why I was concerned about that. Whenever we're using this data source, it makes it really easy for us to update our list box. We don't have to do any for each logic or anything to add all of the entries to our list box. But it does mean that we might have to do a little bit of work to update it. Hang on, I've got some code here. I can find it. Okay, so online, when I found the information to add our data source just to our array, they also have this other line of code that they say has to be run to cause a refresh of the list box. So it's this currency manager and then the name of our list box and the name of our array and refresh. So let's try that. This is not something that I've done before because using a data source in our list box is kind of a new thing. So let's add this code. They say it starts with 2 open parentheses. So I'm already a little worried about it. The currency manager. And then within the 2 closing parentheses, we want the name of our list box. List box compilations. And we want to affect the binding context. And the array that we're using is our my comp list. Now, after the closing parenthesis, we want dot refresh. So I'm not getting any errors on that line of code. That's a good sign. So the currency manager is a system process that is out there keeping track of what's in our list box and how our data source is mapping to our list box. And so we're going to notify this process that we need a refresh. Let's try it.
Bit of a confusing name, that one.
Isn't it?
Feels like
I'm looking at it and I'm like, I don't know if that's valid syntax or not. We'll see. Sometimes when we're trying to figure out new things, we have to do a lot of brutal stuff. I'm going to try to open my file. I'm going to check in the debugger. I just have 3, of course. Now I'm going to continue and see if it gets mad. Oh, it gave me nothing. That's no good. It made it worse.
Probably, it looks like it refreshed it.
Did it refresh it? Into nothing. My comp list. That looks right. I'm going to run it without the debugger. Oh my goodness, what if we have to put in all the code to process each of our line items in our list box? We sure can, but I was hoping that that currency manager thing would work. Well, let's comment it out. I'm going to put two slashes there, and I'll put 2 slashes above it and make it a to-do. How to update So our awesome data source capability that just makes it so easy. In the end, maybe not. But we'll come back to it and see. So before we go back to that and spend a bunch of time, the more pressing thing for us to get done right now, and I want you to kind of notice that when you're working on your final, sometimes it's really easy to get sidetracked on a little thing like this update. This update is a little thing that could become a big problem, right? But at this point in my progress, I can't afford to stop for an hour or two to figure it out. I need to continue on to get all of the other functionality in place, and then I can come back and work on the details. So remember, when you're working on your final, you kind of want a complete skeleton, and then you can fill in the blanks. If you focus just on one area, you can kind of get yourself in trouble because you don't have enough time to get all of the little pieces in place. So our next piece that we need to get in place is writing lines out to our file. So it shouldn't be too bad. Let's start out with our form. In our form, we're going to let the user save their file. I've got save as here, or save all, and it should be save as. Let me update that. It's the A that should have the underline. So if someone picks save as or save, what's the difference between those two when you're working with Windows?
You get to change the name and the location.
Which, with both of them, or with save as?
Oh, say that.
With save as, exactly. So they are a little different. Now, what about that very first time you save?
The first time you save, it'll work the same.
It'll do the save as, right? Even if you choose save. So we need to put something in there like that, like kind of like Max asked us to put in that last file name. We need to know what they've saved a file name as too. So that's going to be a global field or a class level variable that we're going to need to create. So let's do our save as first, because that's the one we run. That's like our most important one. So in our menu, double click on your save as and have it create your event procedure. Let's put our comments up here. This event procedure will execute from the menu file save as and from the toolbar. Do we have a toolbar save as? We'll have to see. So when somebody says that they want to save, I want to show a dialog. Well, I've got to add that to the form. So let's go back to our form design. And just like we had to add the open file dialog, system dialog to our form, if you look at the dialogs, we need to add the save file dialog. When you look at the save file dialog properties, you'll see a lot of the same properties that you see for the open file dialog. We have, our file name, our filter, whether we want to allow this file to be overwritten. The overwrite prompt is, how if you save something as a PDF and it pops up and says that file already exists, do you want to overwrite? That's the overwrite prompt. So if we set that to true, Windows will automatically make that happen for us. So one thing that we should change is our title. For the title of our form, because this is going to be our save as process, let's make it say save as. Any other things that we need to change, we'll update in our code. So let's try putting a little bit of code in there. We've got this new dialog. Save save file dialog 1. And if we do a show dialog on that, just to see what it looks like, let's run it. File, save as. Now, we've got our title up here, save as. Mine right now is in my project folder, so that's okay, that's where it's opening. We don't have any sort of file name or type or anything like that. So when we're doing a save as, do we want to start out with the file name that we used for the open? Would that be a good way for us to set that up? Let's try it. Before we display it, let's set our file name equal to our last file name variable. And our file extension they give that a weird name. What is it? I don't see file extension. Do you guys see it? Maybe we don't need it for the save. Let's check. You do see it? Add
Last time you
extension.
did set last file extension, it would be default ext.
Yeah, default.
Default. That's what it's named.
Default, yeah.
There it is. Thanks, you guys.
Answer sets the default file.
That's what we needed. Last file extension.
So do you see the audio dot text though?
Uh-huh. Now, one thing, did we update those properly in our open? Let's check. I don't think we did. In our open tool strip menu item, after we see that they opened a file, we process it. Let's make sure and update those variables. Last file name equals our open file dialog 1 dot file name. And our last file extension, we want to set that equal to that default extension. So now when we do an open, we'll actually save those values, which is what we should have been doing. That's a little bug we had. We weren't really saving them. Okay, now I can go back to continue on in our save as. Let's see what that looks like now. I'm going to run it. And if I do save as right away, it's coming up with just our default audio.txt. I'm going to go ahead and open or choose cancel. And now I want to try to open the file. And now let's choose file save as. And I got the whole thing. That looks kind of weird. So we have got a lot more than just our audio.txt. All right, so now we know what we're working with. Let's close this. And in the show dialog, we're going to let them pick the file that the file name that they want to use to save this file. So again, in an if statement, we're going to make sure that when they run, the result is not equal to dialog result cancel. And just like our open now, we need to get this file opened for output, and we need to get it properly prepared to write things to. So in our open file dialog, we created our method called file process. So for this one, let's do save file process. And we'll pass in our save file dialog.file name. Let's create that thing. Our new method is going to go right under our green curly brace if yours is looking like mine. And it's going to be a void method. And it's expecting a string with the file name. In our file process, we said we had to put everything within a try-catch, and that's the same here. So I'm going to type try and press tab, and let Visual Studio pop all that code in for me. I'm going to get rid of the throw, because I don't want to involve the operating system if there's a problem. I just want to take care of it here. And in my try, I'm going to try to open that file. Now we can use system.io.streamwriter. We use Streamreader to read the file, so we use Streamwriter to write it. We'll call our Streamwriter object file out. How's that? And we'll say it's a new instance of our system.io writer, and we want it to use our file name. Oops, I need an uppercase N there. Now that should process or open our file for output. Now in our output, we need to process all of those items that are in our array. Trouble? Something the matter, Max? What's wrong? It won't work? Nothing wrong? Nothing wrong? All right, so for each, let's see, what are our things called? Compilation. In our array. So our for each statement will let us loop through that array or look at every entry in our array. And we're saying for each entry in our array, remember that it's an instance of a compilation, and we want to call that compilation instance comp within our for each loop. So now that I've got that compilation instance, I need to take it and put those commas in between each thing, each field. So what do you guys think about that? Should we put commas between each of our fields here in this form code, or should we update our compilation class to add a new like toFile method that outputs all of the fields with commas in between them? We could go either way. Because we're right here in this code, we can just use it. But I want you to really consider about where would be the proper place for this code. So I'm ready to process each of these compilations. What I can do is set up a string that is my output file line, and I'm going to set that equal to one of those interpolated strings, and I want my comp.id and a comma and my comp.album and a comma and my comp.artist, a comma, my comp dot number of tracks, almost all of them, cost, and finally that Boolean comp dot is collector.
Have a dot between comp or double track and comp.
Oh, thank you. That would make things really mad, wouldn't it? Perfect. So now we've just got all of our compilation fields ready to output into our text file. We should just be able to write it. So file out. The file out has several methods available, one of which is write. I'm going to look at all the rest of them. Looks like write would be our choice. And what do I want to write? This output line that I just created. Now, once we're done with our for each loop, we've processed all of the entries in our array. We've written them all out to this file, so we can close it. So notice how our output, whoops, I need the file name. Our output just seemed a lot easier, didn't it, than our input? And it is, because in our input, we had to, separate all of the fields, assign the value to each field. And when we're writing it out, we already have each field. We just need to format them with a comma in between to write them out to our output file. I think that our catch is okay that way, and we don't need any other stuff at all. It looks good. Look okay? Let's try it. So I'm going to do file open and get my text file open. And then I'm going to do file save as. And I want to save this as a different name. Still got some issues here with our defaults for our file save as dialog. I'm going to call this one new audio. And I'll save as type.txt. I'll just put .txt. Definitely some issues there. Let's save it. And let's see what we get. Oh, it crashed. Oh, comp was null. How many entries did we have in our my comp list array? 10. And how many albums do we have? 3. So it's trying to write out the empty ones. So it's getting upset with us. So let's close. That's what we needed to know. So in our for each loop, we only want to do this if there's actually data, there's an actual compilation. So if comp is not null, whoops. Doesn't like me. Let's Google it. Pretty simple syntax, but it's changed a lot over different versions of Visual Studio. So C# check object for null. Oh, Stack Overflow. Let's see what they say.
That worked for me.
Did that work for you?
Yeah, if prompt is not equal to.
But did you put the not equal like this? I was trying to do words. It got mad at me for that. So I got to do the not equal. I can't do is. I thought I could. So if comp not equal null, I'm going to put my opening curly brace and then put my closing where it belongs. So if it's not null, we're going to format our output line and write it out. We know our code was executed, right? Because it crashed big time. So yay, it was running it.
So there was still a file that got saved.
Do I?
There was still a file that got saved.
It didn't save.
It did save.
It did.
It just,
Let's try it. I got to run it. Open our file. Oh yeah, I got a file there. I see what you're saying, but it's empty. Now my new one, save as. I should get, if I use my same file name, I should get that. Are you sure you want to overwrite message? Yup. And I didn't get any errors that time, so that's good. So let's look at File Explorer and see if it's got our records in it. I'm going to right click and open in File Explorer. Where are my text files? I can't find them now. I'm going to have to run it and see where in the world I am. Okay, I'm in the right folder now. That's weird. So finally, I find my new audio text file, because as I've mentioned, I'm having some issues with this project. I got it in the wrong place to start. Ah, well, it looks sort of good, but I only got one big giant record, huh? I need multiple records. And here I just only have one. I'm glad we didn't write over our original file, because we have some problems. So what could we do to make these like go to their own line like they should?
just put like slashings in the.
Slash ends? Yep. Let's do it. So when we're creating our outline, let's add \n at the very end. That should fix us up. Now I'm going to look at my new audio text file. Oh, that looks better. So now I have my individual records on each line like they should be. So we needed our new line character. And notice it with your text boxes, you had to do that carriage return new line. And text boxes are the only thing that make you do both of those control codes. And with a file like this, it would seem like we might need to do both of them, but we don't. We just can do the carriage return. Beautiful. So a few things. We've got some problems with the way this save as is initialized, because it's showing us our full path name to that file and it doesn't have a good save as type, even though we set that file type. So we'll have to look into that a little bit more. And then we need to do our save button. So let's think about this. Whenever somebody clicks save all, we are just getting the last file name, last file extension, and then showing them the dialog. Whenever they do save, we don't necessarily see that dialog box, do we? We kind of just, let me check these messages. It just saves in the background and then it's done. So for our regular save process, we're going to do things a little differently. Let's go back to our form. And for our file menu on save, let's double click that to create an event procedure. Put a comment. This event procedure is called from the menu file save and the toolbar. So this one is kind of our easiest one because if they click save, we just want to make sure that they've already saved something, or are we just going to save? I think we could just save safely defaulting to that file name and file type that we set up in whatever folder they're in. So all we would need to do then is run our save file process, passing in that file name that we have already saved. So let's try it. Save file process using last file name. Very good. We shouldn't really need anything else. Let's put some comments here for our save file process method. I forgot that. This method will open and save the file by writing each array entry to the file as a separate record. Spell separate. Beautiful. Let's try running it. We know that our save as was working somewhat. I'm going to open my file. Let me check it in File Explorer. Right now, my audio.txt file, I'm looking at a details view, of course, because as a programmer, we know I always look at a details view because I drive you guys crazy about it. But I'm looking at a details view and I have file name extensions checked. I should always have hidden files checked too. Oh yeah, look at that hidden file that was there and I didn't even know it. Because I want to be watching these things. It would be super easy for us to end up with a file named audio.txt.txt, and then we wouldn't be able to read it. But the reason I want to look at these details right now is because I'm going to check the updated date and time on my audio.txt file. Right now, it was a couple of days ago. So if I run this and choose save, I should see my update time being now. Where's my app? There it is. Okay, so I'm going to do my file open because I want to have some data. My file from 5.3, and then I'm just going to choose file save. Now, if we look at our details view, we should see our audio. I'm going to refresh. Refresh. Oh, it's not updated. Does yours guys get updated? I'm going to look in my bin debug folder. Nope, it didn't get put in there. I didn't get updated, did you?
No, it's showing the same thing.
Yeah. Okay, so let's do a debugger, see what's going on there. I'm gonna close this, and in my save file process, I'm gonna put a breakpoint here where we open our output file, and I'm gonna run it. Again, I'm gonna open my file. And then I'm going to choose File Save. Okay, so now we're in the right place. And if I look at my file name, I've got a pretty long one there. I'm going to have to look at it down here in my locals window and do some stretching. It looks good. It's got the audio.txt at the end. So I'm going to step into this code, see if I can tell what's going on. Oh, it gave me an error. Look, it's going through our exception processing. And if I look at this exception down here in my locals, it says that the process can't access the file. I'm going to go ahead and let it write that out to the console and finish. And then I'll let this get, I'm going to go to the very end, stop running, and I'm going to open my console window. So view. Where is that silly thing? It doesn't like showing us the console window when we're working in a forms-based application. I'll do view output. Now, as I view output, I do see my exception, and the process cannot access the file. Why? It's being used by another process. I don't have it open anywhere, I don't think. We opened it and closed it, and then we're trying to save it, but it's acting like it's already in use. So what if we use a different file name? The way we have our code set up, we can hardly do that. So let's do some Googling. Google it. C# write file is in use. That's what we want. We want this one where it says that if it exists, it's overwritten. So we have some choices. We could append to our existing file, but with a save, we don't normally do that. So somewhere, oh, they've got append equal true. See what you can find. What we're looking for is something that recreates the file. So file.create replaces an existing file with a new file. Where did they put that? Oh, I see. So they actually have separate code here where they create their file, their save file, and then if it gives them an error, they're saying that the file already exists. We don't really want to do that because we just want to overwrite it. So maybe I need to change my search to something like that. Let's try it. C# overwrite file. Well, they just have all sorts of things for us, don't they? I don't think we need to do all of these things. File.write all text. We'll see here. There's this little teeny example where I'm looking at. The Streamwriter class also has an option to overwrite or append. That would be good. Do we need this little comma false here when we create our new Streamwriter? Let's try it. See if it makes any difference for us. And if not, then I'll leave it to you. I'm going to stop running. Close out of my breakpoint. And in my Streamwriter, when we're allocating that, let's put that false after our file name. I hope that's all we need, because we don't want to do a bunch of revamping of our application. Let's try it. I'm going to open it. And then try my file save. I got no errors. I'm going to close this thing and check my output. Looks like it crashed again. Oh, that one's different though. Look at the exception we got this time. Index out of range exception. We're not even using any indexes. I still think it's because it can't access the file. It's being used by another process. So we've got some sort of problem. And I don't have it open anywhere. So let's just change our save. And in our save, I'm going to go down and find it. Let's just save this to some sort of file that's a new name, audio out.txt, so that we can make sure that our save is actually outputting this stuff properly. I don't want these operating system issues to cause us trouble. So let's try that. we have a hard-coded output file name in our save to see if we can get it to create it properly. So it did something. I'm going to close it, check my output. That time we did exit correctly. If I look at my Explorer, I don't have my audio out. Look in your documents folder and see if it created that. We didn't specify a folder for it. So it could have just created that text file just straight in your documents. I don't see it though. Well, goodness, our application's only going to have a save as because we can't do file save. So that's kind of an interesting thing going on. Why am I having that? I don't know. When we choose to save as and we're choosing our file, then we're being able to answer that overwrite message that yes, we want to overwrite that file. But when we're doing our save in the background and we're not using the file access dialog, we're just having a little bit more problems. So there's some things that we could do to really refine our process here. If you notice when we're working with our save file dialogs, a lot of the help messages that we looked at in Google talk about how we could use other properties like the path and our file name separate from our path. We're using our absolute full path name every time we do anything with our file. We've got our full UNC path name that's taking us to our OneDrive. So that's much more thorough of a path than what a lot of these examples are showing. Our Streamwriter, though, let's just change our false to true and tell it to append. And I want to go back to using our saved file name because we were, I think, getting further with that. Last file name. Okay, so what have we changed? Not much. We're saying that we're going to use that last file name that was saved from our file open. And in our save process, we're going to tell the system to add to our file. So let's try running this. Do my file open. I'm going to try my file save. Again, it didn't give me any errors, but I don't know if that means anything or not. Go check my file explorer. Look at my audio text file, and I still just have those three. Let's check our if statement here. We know this is valid, right? Because it worked for our save as. We might just be out of time here and have to just work with our save as. No more debugging time left. Let's do file open. And I'm going to choose file save. And it didn't go through my breakpoint. So there's a bug. So let's close out. And I'm going to delete this breakpoint. And I'm going to go to our save and set the breakpoint there. I'm going to back up a little bit and say, well, why in the world would it not be getting called? Because here we've been doing all this debugging, and if it's not even running it, okay, so I'm going to file open. Now we set that append flag to true, saying just add it, add more to the file. We don't care, do something. Okay, so now here's our save file process. It is trying to run it. It has that giant long file name. So if I could get this stupid thing out of my way, I'm going to step into, and here's my save file process. Good. So I go to open my file name, saying that we want to append to it. And we get an exception again anyway. The process cannot access the file. It's like our read process is getting that file locked, and we're not being able to use it at all. Which doesn't make any sense. So I'm going to close it. And when we create our file name, let's update it. Last file name equals last file name +1 plus the string 1. So we'll just add a number to the end of it. And I want to see if we get that same error. If we do, we've got some sort of problem in Visual Studio where it's not letting us update our file. You guys, this is not a normal situation. So we're running into some sort of bug or something. We shouldn't be having this happen. Everything that we're doing is fine, but sometimes when there are differences in the operating system and Visual Studio, we can run into bugs. Okay, let's try it. It's like not releasing the file locks on our input file. So I'm going to open this. And then I'm going to try to save. Now, if I could see that file name, I'm going to go ahead and step into. We're in our save file process now. Let's see if we can open our file. Oh, it let us. So that's better. So now we're in our for each loop. We should be outputting those items to our file. We're getting a compilation. This first compilation is not null. It's my white album one. I'm going to build my output string. This is why we can set that debugger option to ignore all of our properties, because it can take a while for us to process them all. And then we write our output line, and then we read another one. That all looks good. So I'm just going to tell this thing to continue, because it seems like it's doing everything properly. Now I'm going to look at my folder. And there's my new file, audio text 1.
Is that one making the difference?
Yeah, it's making the difference. So let's edit. I right clicked on it. I'll choose edit with Notepad++. Because I added a 1 to the end of the TXT, so it doesn't know what to do with it. There it is. So our file looks good. We just have some sort of conflict with our save. So I'll do some research on that. But it's basically all working. Now, we definitely could stand a little bit of prettying up. We've got some issues with our defaults for our save dialog box. We've got this operating system issue where it won't let us resave our file that we just opened. That's okay, we can handle that. And then we have this update issue where it's not updating our list properly. So a few little things for us to be concerned about. So let's look at our list update issue. I want to do a little bit of Googling about that. C# currency manager. I would think that our refresh should be doing the right thing. Let's just do it by hand. We'll add that in, make you guys do some work. Right here, I'm on line 122, looking in this area where we had our currency manager stuff. Let's go to the end of that method and let's add a new method. This will be a void method, and we're going to call it update list box. And this one won't be too bad because we know exactly what we need to do for each. In our collection, I pressed tab accidentally. So my comp list is the collection, and the var type is compilation. And our variable name, let's see, we'll make it COMP for one compilation. Now in our for each loop, the first thing is we know that if our compilation is null, we don't want to process it. So we're going to check and make sure it's not null. And if it's not null, we're going to take our list box and within our list box, we want to add a new item. So let's see what kind of methods we have for list boxes. We are working with their items, and we want to add an item. And the item that we're going to add is this compilation. Now, that should be all we need. This loop is going to look at every compilation in our comp list. If it's there, it's going to add it to our list box. So we should be able to remove this data source above. I'm going to comment this out. Do not use data source. And instead, we'll call our new method update list box. And we could call that wherever we wanted to, and it would update our list box. Let's try it. get my file. Oh, that seemed to work. Let's open our file again, because remember what I was concerned with was I wanted to be able to just double this thing up. There it is. Now we're getting it. What happens if we do it again? We're going to have like quadruple. We're adding a bunch. So we can have some additional test data in our application. So a little bit for you guys to debug and a little bit for me to debug. I'll try to figure out what's going on with our operating system level. But in the meantime, I want you to look at the save as dialog box and see how could we set up our defaults better on that. It looks like we have more than just our file name in our file name. We have our whole path also. And it's not coming up with the right extension when we open that thing. So spend some time looking at that save as in the save file dialog and see if you can get some better default settings for that. You should already be working on your final a little bit. So make sure your form design is going, get started on that, thinking about, what kind of different methods you're going to have. If you're going to have any classes, you probably are going to have a class for that big catch, and do those sorts of things. So Monday, we'll both report back. I want to know if you find any way to do the save dialog box better. And I'll let you know if I figure out some way we probably need to add some sort of code to release that file after we've opened it, more than just closing it that I'm not aware of. So that's what I'll be looking for, something that's keeping it still in use. It's kind of like if you're trying to safely remove a flash drive. I always love watching people do that. You're trying to safely remove it because if you just yank it out, you risk corruption. So you're doing your safely remove and Windows keeps telling you that your flash drive is in use. Now there's two ways you can approach that. You can say, oh, stupid Windows, and yank it anyways and corrupt it for sure. Or you can shut Windows down so that you make sure that all of the locks are released. We can't shut Windows down and keep running our program. For some reason, it's not releasing those locks. So it's just that same kind of thing. We'll figure it out. But we're getting close to out of time. And I don't want to do all that debugging together. I want you guys to do some on your own. So this application is here for you as an example. In all of the videos that are posted with the final, you have another example that's a little different, but yet very, very similar so that you can start figuring out what's the same and what's different. Questions? Any questions before we go? All right, we'll look at those things next time, and then the rest of our time will be lab time. So if you're joining us next time via Teams, be sure to check in to see if there's any updates. Other than that, we shouldn't have anything going on Teams. So I'm going to end our session. You have a great weekend.